freedom for all, and the men respond, all for freedom. My name is KAIJA, Deputy Chief of Staff in the PFF party in Uganda. I take this opportunity to greet you all, wherever you are, and to thank you for the support, the enormous support you've given to the struggle to liberate this country. As of today, our patriarch, Dr. Kizza Besigye, has spent 300 days in prison. I do not know when. Today is the 12th of September 2026. So it will depend on when you have watched this show. You'll add on the number of days then. Today I come to you to tell you the genesis of our struggle. Because by the time we started our struggle, there was no social media. You would either read the mainstream newspapers or go and watch TV or radio. Those were the sources of information. Or if you're connected to those who have access to knowledge. 25 years down the road, our struggle has been distorted. You even had elements of people calling themselves fighting to remove the regime, claiming that Dr. Besigye is in jail only to facilitate a camp where it will come back. And to the gullible public, that is taken as the gospel truth. For information, Dr. Besigye fell out with the establishment way back in 1999 and was removed from government and taken to massacre in the Mechanized Division because they feared his influence, his politics, and was taken in the army for confinement. The way he is now taken to Ruzira for confinement. They did not want him to access the population and discuss the issues at hand. Around 1999, Dr. Besigye wrote the famous Dossier about how the NRM had gone off the rail. And that Dossier caused him problems. Mr. Miseveni wanted to court-martial him. And actually, the reason why Dr. Besigye joined the mainstream politics is not that because he wanted to become president. He had actually, and the colleagues had identified individuals who were thought that they would be the right people to replace Mr. Miseveni. Among them was the Honorable Bidandisali, still alive. You can speak to him. Their first MP of the UPM 1980, the only MP, Crispus Kionga, who coiled, put their legs, the bit of their legs, at the 11th hour. So after realizing that Dr. Besigye was in danger, he called on his colleagues to come up and fight. When he tapped on them, they were too cold to start the fight. He even tapped on his wife, Engineer Winnie Byanyima, that you're a popular person known by Ugandans, you could come and carry the mantle. All of them were not strong enough to stand before and challenge Mr. Miseveni. That document that Dr. Besigye wrote is what I want to read to you today. I do not want to interpret it. We have been told that if you want to hide something from an African, you put it in writing. I realize many Ugandans have not read it. So I decided to read it for you. As you're watching and listening, and then we'll discuss these issues. Possibly we'll know where we are coming from and why we are where we are. I start. It's a heading, how Dr. Besigye's internal memo in 1999 exposed Mr. Miseveni's masked pair of metaphors peeling them to what he is today. The 1999 memo, Robert is below. I start reading. I have taken keen interest and participated in the political activities on the Ugandan scene since the late 1970s. This was during a period of intense jostling to topple and later succeed the Idi Amin regime. I am therefore fully aware of the euphoria, excitement, and hope with which Ugandans received the Uganda National Liberation Front stroke Army, the UNLF-A. Ugandans supported the UNLF's stated approach of political consensus through the Common Front. It was hoped that the new approach to politics would be maintained and Uganda rebuilt from the reign left by the Amin regime. Unfortunately, instead of nurturing the structures and regulations which bound the front together, we witnessed a primitive power struggle that resulted in ripping the front apart to the charging of the population. Some of us young people then were immediately thrown into serious confusion. We had not belonged to any political party before, and we did not approve of the record and character of the existing parties, UPC and DP. Spontaneously, many people started talking of belonging to a third force. This force represented those persons who wished to make a fresh start at political organization, with unity and consensus politics as the center pin. With a few months left to the 1980 elections, the third force crystallized into a new political organization, the Uganda Patriotic Movement, UPM. The population, to a large extent, expressed their appreciation of the ideas and opportunity presented by the young organization, but was pessimistic regarding its electoral success. Pessimism was justified because the new organization simply had no time and resources to organize effectively nationally, and UPC was already positioning itself very loudly and arrogantly to rig the elections, and seemed to have what was essential for them to do so successfully. After the sham 1980 elections, when Paulo Mwanga, a leader of UPC in brackets and the chairman of the Electoral Commission, took over all powers of the Electoral Commission and declared his own electoral results, there was widespread despondency and tension. While the minority DP members of parliament took up the opposition benches in parliament, the rank and file of the party rapidly united behind the new force of resistance to struggle against the dictatorial rule. The Popular Resistance Army, PRA, and later NRA, led by Yoweri Museveni, which later with 30 fighters was overwhelmed by the people seeking to join its ranks. The NRM was born as a political organization in June 1981. It was created by a protocol that effected the merger of Uganda Freedom Fighters, UFF, led by the late Professor Wycliffe Lay, and Miseveni'S PRA. The armed wing of the organization became the National Resistance Army, called the NRA. The NRM political program was based on 7 points, which were later increased to become the well-known 10-point program. The basic consideration in drawing up the program was that it should form the basis of the broad national political and social force. The national coalition was considered to be critical, important in establishing peace, security, and optimally moving the country forward. The political program was therefore referred to as a minimum program around which different political forces in Uganda could unite for rehabilitation and recovery of the country. To achieve unity, it was a vision that the minimum program would be implemented by a broad-based government. After the Bush War, discussions were undertaken by the various political forces to establish a broad-based government and would reflect a national consensus. The NRM set up a committee led by KAIJA, then chairman of the NRM Political and Democratic Committee, for the purpose of engaging the various groups in these discussions. This exercise was, however, never taken to its logical conclusion. It would appear that once the leaders of the political parties were given good posts in the NRM government, their enthusiasm for the discussion waned and the process eventually fizzled out. In spite of the lack of proper modus operandi, the initial NRM government in the executive branch was impressively broad-based. Consensus politics conducted through election based on individual merit and formation of broad-based government became the hallmark of the NRM. Broad-based Undermining. However, the popular concept of the broad-based government, which had also received support for most political groups, was progressively undermined. It ought to be remembered that due to the support and the cooperation of other political groups, no legal restrictions were imposed on political parties until August 11, 1992, when the NRC made a resolution on political party activities in the interim period. In my opinion, there were three factors responsible for me undermining and later destroying the NRM cardinal principle of broad-basedness, especially in appointment of executive. The NRM had set to serve for a period of 4 years as an interim government, then return power to the people. However, it was not very clear how this would happen at the end of the 4 years. Some politicians in government of NRM who came from other political parties set out to use their advantage position to, on one hand, undermine the NRM, on the other hand, strengthen themselves in preparation for the post-NRM political period. Consequently, they fell out with the NRM leadership, and a number of them were arrested and charged with treason. Historical NRM politicians who thought that they were not appropriately placed in government blamed this on the large number of non-NRM people in high-up places and set out to campaign against the situation. They created a distinction between NRM leaders on NRM and broad-based. If you are referred to as broad-based, it was another way of saying that you were undeserving of your post, or that you were possibly an enemy agent or a fifth columnist. After some years of NRM rule, some in the leadership began to feel that there was sufficient grassroots support for the NRM, such that once you offload the broad-based elements in government at no political cost. These factors were at the center of an unprincipled power struggle which was mostly covered and hence could not be resolved democratically. It continued to play itself out outside the formal movement organization, with the users of weakening and eventually losing the concept of consensus, politics, and broad-basedness. By the time of the Constituent Assembly elections were made in 1994, the NRM is all-encompassing, broad-based concept remained only in name. For instance, while the CA electoral law clearly stated the candidates would stand on individual merit, the NRM Secretariat set up a special commercial committee at districts whose task was to recommend NRM candidates for support. Not only did the logistical and administrative machinery of the NRM move against the candidates supporting or suspected of be favoring early return to multi-party politics, it even moved against liberal candidates advocating for initial NRM broad-based concept. That is why many people were surprised and confused when some senior NRM leaders declared that we have won after the CA results were announced. Who had won? It was clear that there were two systems, one described in the law, another being practiced. Moreover, the conduct of the CA again exhibited the contradiction between the principles of NRM and the law and the practice. I was quite alarmed when I read a document titled Minutes of a Meeting between His Excellency the President and the CA Group held on the 25th of August 1994 at Kizza. The copy had been availed to me by my colleague Lieutenant Colonel Serwanga RIP, rest in peace, who attended the meeting. Present at the meeting were recorded as His Excellency the President, Chair, Elia Kategaya, Idandi Sali, Stephen Chebrot, Agad Didi, George Kanyehamba, Miriam Matembe, Mathias Ngobi, Mr. Sebalu, Lieutenant Nobo Mayombo, Jotham Tumwesige, Aziz Kasuja, now the late, Nobo Mayombo the late, Beatrice Lagada, Faith Monda, and Margaret Ziwa. The introduction of the meeting reads in part as follows. The National Political Commissar introduced this committee as a Constituent Assembly movement group which wants to agree on a common position. The arbitrary handpicked group went ahead to take positions on major areas of the draft constitution, which we members of CA considered as NRM supporters were supposed to support in the CA. It is interesting to note that among the 16 hand-picked members of the group, only 6 were directly elected to represent constituencies in the CA. The others were presidential nominees and representatives of the special interest groups. One member was not even a CA delegate. We strongly consider this approach, and after intense pushing and shoving, this group was replaced by the Movement Caucus under the chairmanship of the National Political Commissar KAIJA. Changing movement. The Movement Caucus acted very much like an organ of a ruling party. All ministers except Paul Semogerere, who later resigned from government, were members. The hand-picked group and the Movement Caucus, after it, both undermined the principle of the movement and the law. The Constituent Assembly was negatively influenced by the executive appointments. In the middle of the CA proceedings, the cabinet reshuffle saw Special Zakazi were elevated to the Vice Presidency, Kintu Musoko to Prime Minister, and several other delegates are appointed to ministerial posts. Many others were appointed to be directors of parastatal companies. In my opinion, that after these actions, some CA delegates took positions believed to attract favorable attention of the executive. More CA delegates also intended to participate in the elections that would immediately follow the CA. These are two negative effects. Being aware of the previous role of the NRM secretary in elections, some CA delegates would be compromised to act in such a way as to win support of the secretariat in the forthcoming elections. Some CA delegates saw themselves as first beneficiaries of the government structure and arrangement that were being constitutionalized. So they took positions that would favor them and not the common good. As a result, the CA progressively became polarized and its objectivity was diminished, especially when dealing with political systems. For example, at the commencement of the CA, every delegate made an opening statement highlighting major views on the draft constitution. Analysis of these statements shows that few delegates supported the immediate introduction of a party system, while the majority supported the continuation of the movement system for the transitional period of varying length. The positions expressed were very much in line with the views gathered by the Constitutional Commission. The Commission noted in its report, paragraph 0.46, that the consensus of the issue could not be attained. This was demonstrated by the statistical analysis of views gathered by the RC1, now what we call LC, to RC5, plus individual and group memoranda. It will be seen that nationally, at RC1, movement supporters were 63.2%, and this percentage decreased progressively as they went to higher RCs under RC5 district councils, where the movement supporters were only 38.9%, and multi-party supporters were 52.8%. Among the individual memoranda, 43.9% supported a multi-party system, while 42.1% supported movement. Among the group memoranda, 42.1% supported multi-party, while 41.4% supported movement. It is important to note that these views were gathered at the time when there was no impending election and therefore no campaigning. Accordingly, the Constitutional Commission proposed the following as the only limitation on political party activities. In Article 99 of the draft Constitution, for the period when the movement is in existence, political parties shall not endorse, sponsor, offer platform to or in any way campaign for or against any candidate for public office. The CA, under the influence outlined earlier, ended up with restriction containing in the highly contentious Article 269 of the Constitution. The character of the movement gradually changed, and the process of change was not determined democratically. Instead, it was continuously manipulated. Established movement organs were continuously undermined and other completely ignored. For example, the National Executive Committee of the NRM was the organ supposed to be coordinating change in the NRM. Yet, NEC had not met for more than 3 years prior to the promulgation of the 1995 Constitution. In spite of a requirement for it to meet at least once every 3 months, Instead, covert and arbitrarily constituted groups came in, like District Election Committee, Special CA groups, Movement Political High Command, Movement Caucus, Major Kakoza Mutale's group, etc. The movement created by CA and completed by Parliament through the Movement Act 1997 was different from the one of 1986 to 1995. The Movement Act 1997 created a political organization with structures outside the government structure. For the first time, the movement was a political organization distinct from government. The only remaining link between that, it was funded by government. Unfortunately, instead of describing the movement as a political organization, the CA chose to call it a political system, distinct from multi-party political system and other systems that may be thought of later. This was, in my opinion, a grave error. We even ignored advice given to us through a letter by President Yoweri Museveni, chairman of NRM and Commander-in-Chief NRA, to the CA NRM caucus delegates, dated June 21st, 1995. In the letter, the chairman says, the NRM is not a state, but a political organization that tries to welcome all Ugandans. It therefore cannot coerce all Ugandans to be loyal to it. Loyalty to NRM is voluntary. Close quotes. The reality of the movement today, 1999, is that it is a political organization in much the same way as a political party is. Having no membership card does not make it less so. In fact, in the letter referred to above, the President further explained, open quotes, then some people may ask the question, if NRM could be all ready to compete for political office with opposing political forces in the future, why not do it now? Do not support doing it now because it does not in the best interest of governance, and fortunately now the people still agree with us. It is only when the majority of the people change that we have to adjust our position. It would be something imposed on us by circumstances. Close quotes. So the NRM movement system, stock movement system, is a convenient and for the time popular means of political power. Manipulation. The characteristics which made the NRM government popular, such as broad-based strategy, principle of individual merit, and the 10-point program, have been seriously eroded. This is evidenced by the bitter antagonism and animosity which exists between movement supporters in many parts of the country, Igi, Kabale, Tungamu, Kasese, and Iganga. After more than 30 years of NRM rule, armed rebellion raged on in northern Uganda and has also become entrenched in western part of the country. Rebellions ended when multi-party politics was reintroduced in 2005. All in all, when I reflect on the movement philosophy and the governance, I can conclude that the movement has been manipulated by those seeking to gain and retain political power, in the same way that political parties in Uganda were manipulated. Evidently, the results of this manipulation are also the same, to wit, functionalism, loss of faith in the system, corruption, insecurity, and abuse of human rights, economic distortions, and eventual decline. So, whether it's political parties or movement, the real problem is dishonest opportunism, and undemocratic leadership operating in a weak institutional framework and a weak civil society which cannot control them. I have shown that over the years that the women's system has been defined in law in a certain way, but the leaders have chosen to act a different way. This is dishonest and opportunistic leadership. I have also shown how changes have been made in the movement agenda and other important decisions have been made outside the movement structure. This too is undemocratic leadership. In my opinion, the way forward is developing a stable political situation is to do the following. Urgently revisit the legal framework with a view to making an equitable law and regulation for all political organizations but partisan. The movement should be treated as a political organization, not a system. Implementing this would need amendment to the Constitution, including amendment of Article 69 and 74. This requires approval of the people through a referendum, and the forthcoming referendum would be used for this purpose. In any case, laws are a reflection of the political will. So if there is a political will to correct the situation, finding a way is easy. The primary guarantor of democracy, human rights, and rule of law must be the civil society. Its capacity should therefore be quickly developed. Focus on a program that could quickly raise the standards of living of our people to a decent level. This is an essential antecedent for our society to build a viable democracy. Of course, the approach raising the standards of living is highly debatable. I have personal views that I hope to share with the public at another time. I pray to the Almighty God to guide us so that we do not tremble again. Signed, Retired Colonel Dr. Kizza, Besigye, Warren, 1999. Ugandans, that was the document. Those who don't want to read, you can listen. I have read word by word, not omitted a word, and listen to this rich document. If you listen to it, if you want a copy, we shall share. You'll understand the genesis of our struggle and what we want this country to be. Thank you so much, fellow freedom fighters. Freedom for all for freedom.